Hi, I'm Dave Gardy from Maritime TV from our studios here near Washington, D.C. for this special presentation, another ballast water management report. And with us via Skype right now from New York is Steve Candito, CEO of Ecochlor. Steve, thanks for joining us today.
Well, Dave, it's good to see you again. Hope all is well.
Yes, it is, and I hope all is well with you. Hey, there's a ballast water management system code change and new pieces of it. Can you give us an overview of what that's all about?
Yeah, so as we talked about in a prior report, the deadline is coming up in October 2020. And, there's a number of changes, but there are four, I think, significant ones that most vessel owners should keep an eye on. The first is that there are new requirements for the operating limits of the system. The second is that there are system design limitations that need to be noted on the type approval certificate. And then there's some bypass arrangements that are required to be noted and monitored. And then there's just monitoring generally of the system that's required under these new regulations. So those are the four most significant changes.
Now, I understand there's been some discussion on the operating limitations and the system design limitations. A little more detail there. What's going on?
Yeah, I think that's important, right? So on the operating limits, they're usually focused on things like the salinity of the water and the temperature of the water. And where previously you maybe were able to test the system in, let's say, just salt water and maybe brackish water, and you could get an approval for all three types of water, meaning fresh water, salt water, and brackish water. Under the new requirements of the code, if you want approval in all three salinities, then you have to test in all three salinities. So that's a pretty big change. And similarly, on the temperature, there's a very specific range now between 0 and 40 degrees C if you're in salt water, and between 2 degrees C and 40 degrees C if you're in fresh water. So previously, you may have operated in some different temperatures, but now you have to make sure the system works in those areas.
How about on the system design limitations?
Yeah, so this is another one that I think owners really need to be careful of. And this is the one where any limitations need to be specifically spelled out on the type approval certificate. And here it's things like the capacity of the system, based on the flow rate. So just for example, the Ecochlor system is approved from 500 cubic meters up until 16,200 cubic meters per hour. In fact, that's the highest approved in the industry. So that needs to be specifically noted on the type approval certificate. And then it's the water quality issues. And this is particularly important for UV approvals. If you have very dirty water, those UV systems may not work well, and so there may be some limit on the turbidity of that water, particularly for a UV system. So that's a good example of something that will now have to be noted right on that type approval certificate.
Now, what's going on with the code as it relates to the testing upon commissioning?
Yeah, so this is another critical point, and there's, again, been some dialogue about this going back, because when the system is commissioned, after it's been installed and making sure that it's operating properly, there's still a little controversy on whether you have to do an indicative test or a detailed test. And of course, an indicative test is a rapid test. It's not very costly, but it's also not reliable. Where a detailed test, of course, is going to be very reliable, but starts getting more costly and can take some time. So in addition to that sort of controversy over the testing, the testing has to be done by the ship's crew. It can't be done by the manufacturer. And what we've seen is that sometimes a commissions test is being failed, not because the system isn't working properly, it's because the crew didn't really know how to operate the system. And of course, it's a brand new system. So the caution there for owners is you really need to take some time training your crew, maybe doing some practice runs before you actually get to the commission test to make sure that the system is going to pass that test.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate that perspective. We've been talking to Steve Candito, CEO of Ecochlor, for this Ballast Water Manager Report. Thank you for joining us, Steve.
Thank you, Dave.
I'm Dave Gardy from Maritime TV's Ballast Water Manager Report. Thanks for watching.